Hey, I'm Erin. I think many of us have either talked or met at some point. I guess this is a really good time for me to announce that I am currently in between positions. So I am Erin, currently of the employer vacation, but I will be joining the team at Robinhood in August as their global IT manager.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Next, we have David Yoon.
Hi, everyone. My name is David, and I'm one of the HCS Technology Group's professional services consultants. We help organizations of all sizes solve Apple-related deployment management challenges. We have footprints throughout US and Canada.
Excellent. And then we have Tom Bridge.
Hello. I'm Tom Bridge. I'm a partner at Technolutionary here in Washington, D.C. We're an MSP and IT consultancy. And, I was going to say I've been a MacAdmin for a very long time now.
Fantastic. And if I can, Jason, can I just loop back to you and make sure we got your audio? And can you give us a little introduction?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jason from Fastly. We are a CDN, so a lot of people use this, but they probably don't realize this. And I've been a MacAdmin for quite a while now, and some people have known me from Tech when I spoke at PSU a few years ago.
Awesome, thank you. Fantastic. So we got a couple questions to start off, but we're looking for more in the Q&A. So as we go through today's Q&A panel, please do add some more questions. Starting off, though, I'm going to throw this out to anyone that'd like to start answering it. What do you wish you knew when you were starting out as a MacAdmin? And what do you wish somebody, what do you wish somebody would have told you?
So I'll hop in there, Jason here. Things that I wish that someone would have told me from the beginning is I am not alone. And to know that there are other people out there actually facing the exact same problems that I am. And they are using the community of people to actually help solve problems. Many times I thought that I was the only person having a problem with the Zooms or with the Oktas or with whatever, trying to get my software installed on Macs. And it turns out that everyone was probably having the same problem or similar problems. So using the community actually, and that there are people out there who are experiencing the same things.
Yeah, I can build on that too, because I definitely felt the same way for a long time. And it's funny that you don't ever stop feeling that way, even if you're working on a team. There's always that thing of like, you're just like scratching your face off thinking that like your team is the only one suffering through this pain. I think there was the other component of that, which is don't be afraid to ask questions. Like you really just have to get over that initial fear of asking a bunch of questions. And then the subtext of like, no question is a dumb question. Our expertise comes from many different forms and many different backgrounds. And so our problem solving approaches lend us to asking questions differently. I think the other thing that I wish I had learned earlier, particularly just in the job market, is always be open to a conversation, especially in our community. There are always administrators and other teams looking for great people like us, and being open and prepared for those conversations to happen and leaning into your success through all the questions that you've asked and answered is really healthy and smart as you're growing your career.
Absolutely. And, from my perspective, the thing that I would love to know, or would have loved to have known at the very beginning is you don't have to know everything on your first day. In fact, it's actually better if you don't. And it is totally fine to build your knowledge as you go through time because no one is born knowing all of this stuff. And it was easy to get very, bogged down and hard on myself at the beginning of my career because I didn't know something. And it's okay. You can ask questions. That's totally what that's there for. How about you, David?
Well, I think in terms of community, I'm very fortunate to have a community, geographical-based community. So in Toronto Slack group, we actually have a very specific Toronto channel. So, we have a very vibrant community there. And as a matter of fact, guys are really excited about me, representing Toronto. So that's really great. So having a supportive community where you can get plugged into and ask questions and contribute, right? Because you gotta give and take, right? So there's this fair amount of interaction that is required to be part of the community. Another thing that I wish I knew was really jam training. So jam training was really important for me starting out. And there are other MDM certification training as well. So I find that really important, because it's not just an MDM training. I find it's more it's just a MacAdmins, a general overall know-how, troubleshooting techniques that you can learn from these trainings.
All right, that's fantastic. We actually had another question kind of following up on that. And would anyone kind of have any suggestions on admin training courses that might be available that people can take, as Apple seems to have very kind of few official ones? Jason, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know Jamf has, if you are a Jamf administrator, they do have the Jamf 100, which is actually totally online and free now. You can actually go and get those resources without needing, a supervisor or manager's approval to actually go through any of that knowledge in particular. After that, I actually think great tools you can do is set up VMs for yourself and install software that you were just unfamiliar with. And in doing that, you will then open yourself up to starting to understand and see the different technologies that are in use, but also you'll see the different Slack channels that are also in use inside of the Mac Slack admins, which could help even enhance your knowledge about a particular tool, or even try to understand why it does a certain thing. You never know what you're going to learn from there. Those would be some of the resources I would suggest. How about you, Tom?
I actually think that diversifying away just from the Apple environment is a great thing to do. MacAdmins have to know so much stuff with regard to networking, with regard to Wi-Fi, with regard to software development and packaging, that there's a lot of knowledge that you need to acquire that's not necessarily Apple domain specific, and these are pieces of knowledge that might help you find something that you really enjoy. I discovered I really love building Wi-Fi networks. And that was a surprise. I was not expecting to love Wi-Fi networks, but I really enjoyed the certified wireless network administrator classes and books that are out there. So that was a big part of that for me. Erin, how about you?
I'm gonna throw a couple wrenches in this. That I think that there isn't a lot of great organized training out there, and I have historically been both a proponent of people seeking information and seeking the training that they want if it is of interest to them, which is why I do think that suggesting the Jamf one is one that is structured and formative is great. But what I always find is that it's challenging knowing if that is the right fit for you. So here's what I recommend as somebody who absolutely hates that kind of organized training and very much loves ad hoc learning, is conferences. Conferences are a huge boon for you because they put you in such a different headspace. It's a great place to go and learn about how to strategically think about what you're going to be doing in IT, to learn different language around the questions that you are asking, to get deep dives into particular areas that may be synonymous with your environment, but that you didn't know about. Not only that, it gives you the introduction to the rest of the community who can help educate you through their experiences and their knowledge and depth of expertise. The other thing that I actually really love and recommend pretty frequently, and I've had many conversations about it, is there's this book by Gene Kim, The Unicorn Project and the Phoenix Project. I recommend starting with the Phoenix Project. I think that's the more formative of the two. But it's a really good and oddly fictional way of looking at IT and IT service management that also takes the dryness out of ITIL and general administration. And I do think that it's another way for those of us who are literally just looking for something to go out and educate ourselves on, as we're, as one of the things that comes up is that there is no real formalized training for what we do. It's a very exemplary instance of IT experience, as well as a good whole approach to what we do as IT. So that's usually what I recommend. Everybody comes to me going like, what books do you read? And I'm like, I don't know. I have like a Python cheat sheet and that book on my shelf, like that, and the internet. That's all I have.
I always recommend Support Essential. That's kind of like the foundation for me when somebody's asking me recommendations. I've been kind of getting into like, cloud infrastructure, identity, security, DevOps stuff. So AWS training is also pretty good if you're looking to add something on top of your typical MacAdmins training.
Okay, fantastic points, David. If I could keep you up and start with you on the next question. What tools do you find most valuable in your day-to-day job?
I have a couple. One of my favorite, go-to and absolutely essential for me is Clipboard Manager. I know there's many different types of products out there. I do a lot of, I just copy and I store them and, paste and modify. So that's my go-to. Another thing is I'm also a bookmark hoarder. Guys in Toronto channel know that I have bookmark links for everything is because I just love hoarding them. So for me, bookmark search extension is also a go-to for me because I can't keep up. I try to organize and put it in different folders and stuff like that, but I just can't keep up. So bookmark search extension is good.
Erin, do you have any thoughts on some tools that you like to use every day?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't put me on the spot because every time I come up with like an answer, do I get to play bingo here and be like, Slack's my favorite tool?
Why not? Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about, just what's going on right now in the world. I think that any kind of like having a really solid remote management program or application that you use is pretty freaking key right now, which has risen to the top for me in terms of, like both having worked in an environment where that was very much the fundamental way that I contacted people and did support with them versus an in-person approach, to then moving to a mostly in-person and then back again. I wish I was cool enough to have thought of like clipboard management, because as soon as David said that, I was like, damn, that is a really good one. Yeah, I've been getting pretty deep into Alfred. Honestly, I'll just throw that out there as like my preferable option, mostly because it's something that just optimizes the way that I work. I am very much clearly on the managerial side of the IT spectrum. So my technical suggestions are probably not going to be like the latest and greatest nor the shiniest. But anything that is going to optimize the way that I can interact with my team is key. So yes, cliche, but Slack. Alfred is huge for me because it gets me to the information that I need faster. I will say the other thing that's made a huge difference for me is a time management and time tracker, knowing full well that a good portion of our work is so reactive that it brings me back into the focus of like the things that I need to do on a day-to-day, and a really solid email program, like an application that actually allows me to like get through my email, knowing full well that my responsibility is both to my team as my direct customers and our customers as our employees.
That's fantastic. And before I want to ask Jason the same question, but before I go on, I just want to make sure people understand AlfredApp.com is kind of like another spotlight sort of tool, and it sounds like you've got a lot of possibilities with it, Erin. And maybe we'll try and poke you on some more Alfred for workflows or tips going forward. But Jason, what kind of tools would you find most valuable in your day-to-day?
So for me, I'm also on that manager spectrum, dealing with lots of email and feelings. However, I do find quite the problem with a lot of folks in IT that we have is we don't necessarily have all the time in the world, and keeping track of every single thing that you need to do is a complicated process. And so I'm very much a list person. And I really use OmniFocus, and I really break down projects and different tasks inside of there, especially when I need to follow up with either someone from my team. I need to follow up with also a process, or even with a fast lane, so to speak. I use OmniFocus. I also use the Things app I actually use terminal still to this day quite frequently, especially to query different parts of the operating system when I don't necessarily want to click around my GUI. I'm very much about keyboard shortcuts and using my hands on the keyboard as frequently as possible. And when I'm actually allowed to touch the keyboard, that's what I do. But I think keeping a task manager to keep you kind of honest on yourself, where you can't lose track of the things you really need to do, whether it's build this application, package this, deploy this profile, this actually helps get your kind of thoughts in line and also put some self-imposed deadlines in front of yourself. So that's what I actually love to use to kind of go to.
Yeah, Tom, do you have some apps you like to use day to day?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm always a BB Edit guy, and Rich, if you're out there, you're awesome, and his whole team at Barebones is amazing, and they've got some really incredible tools because it's got syntax highlighting for various languages. You can run scripts directly from BB Edit, which is great when you're testing, and you can get output and figure out what's broken and what's not without having to switch over to the terminal and execute things, which is nice. I am also a huge fan of Tot. Which is Craig Hockenberry's little notepad that you can sync across your iOS device and your macOS device. And I use that as kind of like my little running, okay, this has to happen today. If it lives in Tot, therefore it will happen. As some of my coworkers will tell you, I do also live in email and in Zendesk to varying degrees of success. Zendesk and Watchman work well together. We use Watchman to kind of keep an eye on machines and see what kind of their general mental health is. We use that to tie in directly to our ticketing system so we can know, hey, this ticket actually resolved itself through user intervention, or the user did the thing, but they did not actually come back and update the ticket. And then it's nice because then we can just say, okay, cool, you did the thing. Thank you. Goodbye, ticket. See you later. Have a good one. I was going to say one other thing. Gosh. Oh, text expander. Having the ability to build preloaded form emails for your help desk is absolutely positively essential. To be able to say, hey, your disk is almost full, please delete this much data, and to be able to fill those variables in on the fly is super clutch. Big ups to Kelly on our team who's helping us expand those libraries of snippets to make email communication more about the art of the communication as opposed to the pounding out the words on your keyboard. So
fantastic. Okay, so let's see. We got a couple of questions here. Jason, if I might start with you here, what are your thoughts about the future of Mac management given Apple's moves to tighten down Mac OS?
I think that especially that is something that I am heavily involved with today. Seeing that Fastly and like every company across the world now, you are pretty much in your home constantly. So the days of us having to let IT touch this laptop first have been out the window for the last 4 months, and for Fastly, probably for the future. And my thought process, which I'm getting to, is I just need the ability for a user to get a device, a Mac, and be able just to power it on, set it off as if it were their own, because that's how I want them to treat it, because they'll treat it with more care and love that way. And whatever tools they need, make them available for them to install at their leisure. There's a certain amount of security that I want to see on a device before it actually kind of hits the street, but luckily with MDM, you get the ability to apply those configuration profiles with a lovely splash screen before someone actually gets to use and touch a device. And so if I can get to the zero touch, which we are just about at for me and my team, that is actually where I think everyone should go to. I understand there's tools like dual trusted endpoints, which then require certain browsers to be used. But as long as you have the correct education for your users and the correct infrastructure in place to allow them to safely install whatever software they want, I think you start to land yourself in a successful place to not necessarily rely on an office space in order to serve anybody that you need to serve, or troubleshoot a problem, or even just get hardware to somebody so they can actually do their job.
Tom, do you have any other thoughts on kind of the tightening down of macOS management as we move forward?
I think that's awesome, actually. Because here's the thing, the more that we can enable users to own their own machines with effective, good guardrails, the easier our job gets. And that allows us to do a couple of things. It allows us to empower our users to control their own destiny with their own environments, which is something that proves that, that studies have shown gives people more engagement with their workflow. I mean, obviously, there are always going to be concerns about security and things along those lines, and making sure that we have good, sane defaults is certainly important for our people, and that means setting screensaver passwords and doing some of the basic things that come along with MDM's control on security. But I also feel like I also don't feel like Apple's ratcheting down on control at this point. I feel like you can still install anything you need to install. It doesn't have to be from the App Store. It can be from any Joe, on the internet, as long as they have a signing certificate. And sometimes not even then. When we look at, what Apple has done is that they've made the default experience more secure and made the default experience have fewer controls. I think that's awesome. From my perspective, I don't think that's a negative in any way, shape, or form, and I totally support that mission.
Fantastic. Okay. Any other thoughts on tightening down on macOS Manage?
I think understanding zero touch and learning how to incorporate cloud.
I would say one last thought on the tightening down of macOS management is, I think we as a Mac community need to actually.
Go ahead, Jason. We'll come right back to David.
Yeah.
Unless his video is frozen.
Yeah. Am I back? I think I am.
Yep, you're back.
You're back now.
Okay.
You're back.
I think we actually have to retrain ourselves to think of it not as tightening down, but try to put ourselves in Apple's shoes about the user experience and what they're trying to do. And think of it as they're not trying to tighten it down. They're trying to make a more consistent experience for all of us, people who are admitting tools, as well as people who are actually going to be using those tools. And they're trying to get it to a point to where it's so consistent that management is no longer something that is such a strenuous activity. It is just something that is just ingrained in what we do every single day. And so if we start to shift our mindset on it, I think it helps kind of bridge the gap and turn the corner.
Fantastic. David, what were you thinking on the macOS management?
Well, for me, I think the security in general, and I think we need to switch our mindset in terms of traditional way of thinking security. So with that in mind, I think there's a very important stress in getting the organizations to move towards things like cloud, security and cloud identity. So making sure that your zero touch workflow integrates with things like secure, cloud identity and of that sort. So I think that's where I think it's moving. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's move on to the next. I got another question here. There's a couple fantastic questions. Let's see. And so I want to make this one a little more agnostic. As a new MacAdmin, being new to scripting, which language should I focus on learning?
I've been staring at this question because I am a human who does not take to scripting well. But I know that it's part of the gig. So personally, I'll just talk a little bit personally. Personally, I basically took it, I'm never going to be great at it, and I'm just totally okay with that. It's why I'm in management. It's actually not the reason that pushed me there, but I'm perfectly cool with not being the expert on it. But I do think that understanding and being able to read those languages, at least understanding the fundamentals of it, is pretty critical. And there's a good places to start, and then there's no right answer. I think getting into Shell and being comfortable in a terminal, regardless of the fact that people keep on pushing UI and GUI-based administration on us, especially in SaaS land, knowing your way around a terminal is really, really strong fundamentals. there's a million resources on ways that you can play around with that, and to the point of setting up your own VMs and then going in and breaking things on purpose. It's a really great low impact way of doing that. And starting to play around in a terminal. There's, there's commands that you should be afraid of, and then there's a lot of other commands that are things that you just have to press enter and not be afraid of doing. If I had my opinion on what I feel like is the next natural evolution of that, if you are like me, who doesn't take to scripting easily, I think Bash is a great place to go. Bash is very, very much like, if I was to pick like which math languages made sense to me, like algebra is like the one that I get, and then geometry is like that Winona Ryder gif of like, what the hell is going on? So it just like A to B makes sense in my brain. I think beyond that, it's going to be based on the place that you work and what you are then also most comfortable, or what is going to be the best use for where you are building in one of these scripting languages. And that's also dependent on like, how deep do you really want to go, right? Like if that is actually the trajectory, there's that component of like, if that is the trajectory that your career path is taking, deep diving into languages may actually be a really smart thing for you to do. And for others like myself, understanding Bash and Shell and a little bit of Python, though I wouldn't trust anything that I would not let me deploy anything ever in Python. But I think like stopping there is probably okay too, right? It's about understanding and being able to speak in that language rather than fully fledging the entire experience of being the expert, as well as the person who is going to be doing the thing, if that's not your intention. Ultimately in like 5 or 10 years from now. Also, languages change like constantly. Like
yes.
Swift's rise is both delightful and frustrating because it changes all the time.
Yes, it does. That's very true. Does anyone have further thoughts on what is the correct language to learn?
So there is no correct language to learn. There's only languages that you think are going to be valuable. When it comes to Bash is still the default shell until it's not. And probably at this point in our very mixed fleets, Bash is probably outnumbering ZSH, but it's probably close. Starting with Bash and then going to learn ZSH is a great way to do it. And I'll pump Armin Briegel's book here on adapting to ZSH from Bash. I feel like that's a good place to start. And then, if you really feel like, hey, this isn't getting it done for me, I need to do more than this, or I need to grep, then awk, then grep, then awk. Perhaps you may want to learn Python or Swift at that point. Start with Shell and then go from there into scripting languages that are beyond that. So, yep.
Fantastic, yeah. And Armin just did a very wonderful presentation the previous week on some of that. So do check that out on our YouTube channel if you have a moment. We are very, very close on time, but I wanted to get one more question in, and if I could get a couple of quick responses from folks. I think this is one of the more important things that maybe we don't think about as much. But what tools might you use to share knowledge internally between techs, like knowledge-based articles, troubleshooting steps? Which tools have you found most useful? And anyone can feel free to jump on that question.
Internally at Fastly, we actually have Confluence as our tool of choice. And we actually have two separate spaces. We have one for publicly facing documentation and one for internal facing documentation, which could easily point to one another based on a tagging system. But I think Confluence is a great place, sort of great point for a repository of documents, and then have team training sessions once a week on any new documents that were created and or updated.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to handle it. And I'll just give a plug here for Zendesk's environment, because they do have a guide section that is actually very effective for creating good public-facing documentation as well as internal-facing documentation. And I will also give a shout to the IT Glue folks who have a really good checklist system that's really helpful for if you're building checklists for new clients, if you're building checklists for office moves or anything along those lines. That's a pretty good place to start too.
Yeah, I'm a big I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer learning. I'm just gonna like highlight and emphasize that. Team-based learning.
I like Slack.
I agree with you on that one, David. Slack is quite helpful for sure. Well, I think that's probably about all the time we're going to have today. Jason Miller, thank you so much for taking your time today. Erin Merchant, wonderful to hear and see from you all. David Yoon, really great, fantastic. Tom Bridge, as always, fantastic to see from all of you. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope to hear from you all again. Perhaps the next time we might be able to do something like this in person. That would be cool too. Who knows? But,
thanks, Rusty.
Thank you all.